It all started a few months after my Aunt Lydia passed away. I'm Jake, 32 years old, and for most of my life, I've kept to myself. I'm not the loudest voice in the room. I've never liked drama. I work in cybersecurity, which means I spend more time with code than people, and I'm okay with that. But life has this way of dragging you into the mud, no matter how clean you try to live. And sometimes, that mud has your last name. Aunt Lydia wasn't just rich. She was clever, private, and tough as nails. She never married, never had kids, and for as long as I can remember, she always treated me like I was her own. When my mom, Diane, would guilt-trip her about favoritism, Lydia would just say, "Jake listens. Jake cares. The rest of you take." She wasn't wrong. Lydia had this old colonial-style house on the edge of town. 2 stories, ivy-covered, wraparound porch, hardwood everything. It sat on 3 acres of land. Gated, quiet, beautiful. She called it her sanctuary. My brother, Ryan, used to joke that he'd flip it for $500,000 one day, and Lydia would just roll her eyes and change the subject. Ryan was loud, brash, and always looking for the easy route to big money. If there was a shortcut, he'd find it. If there was a handout, he'd take it. And if there was someone to manipulate, especially family, he had no shame. Lydia passed away peacefully in her sleep at 81. The funeral was small, just a handful of close friends, a couple of extended family members, and, of course, my mother and brother. Ryan barely held it together during the reading of the will. He fidgeted like a kid at the DMV, whispering to Mom every 2 minutes. He was certain he was about to become a millionaire. Instead, Lydia left everything to me. Not just the house. Her entire estate. Every stock, every bond, every asset. Her lawyer, Mr. Whitmore, read it all out loud. Ryan's jaw unhinged. My mom. Well, she didn't even try to hide her fury. "This has to be a mistake," she said, standing up like it was a PDA meeting and not a legal proceeding. Lydia wouldn't do that to her own family. Mr. Whitmore calmly adjusted his glasses. She did, and she was quite thorough. "This isn't something that can be contested." Ryan muttered something under his breath, and I just sat there, stunned. I hadn't expected to be left with all of it. I thought maybe she'd split things between the 3 of us, or even donate most of it. But after everything, she'd trusted me. The thing is, I knew my family well. I knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. So instead of moving into the house and celebrating, I did something else. I created an irrevocable trust. The house, the investments, everything, tucked neatly inside a legal fortress. I still lived in the house, sure, but on paper, I didn't own it. The trust did. And that trust had clear instructions, including who would take over if anything happened to me. It wasn't paranoia. It was preparation. The first few weeks, Mom and Ryan were quiet. Too quiet. I got a couple of passive-aggressive texts. Things like, "Hope you're enjoying the money you didn't earn." And Lydia must have really lost her mind at the end. I ignored them. I figured they'd get bored and move on. Then I started noticing cars idling outside the gate. Once, I came home and saw Ryan standing just outside the property line, hands in his pockets, staring at the house like he was trying to memorize every inch of it. I didn't confront him. Just watched from the upstairs window, heart thudding, already making a mental list of things I'd need to tighten. Surveillance footage, insurance, locks. But then it got bolder. Mom showed up one Sunday with Ryan, holding a manila envelope and a smug little smile. "We've had the deed transferred," she said, like she was telling me the casserole was in the oven. "You're out by Monday." I blinked. "You what?" Ryan stepped forward, grinning like a man who'd just won a poker game with a royal flush. "It's done. The deed is in my name now." "Sorry, bro." I didn't even get mad. I just leaned against the porch post, crossed my arms, and gave them a little smirk. "You really think I didn't plan for this?" They looked at each other, confused. My mom's smile faltered for a split second. "Enjoy your day," I said, walking back inside and locking the door behind me. The next 48 hours were oddly calm. Too calm. I went about my routine, made coffee, worked from home, even took the dog for a walk down the wooded path behind the property. But I could feel the tension building like a storm cloud hanging just out of reach. Then, on Wednesday morning, I looked out the window and saw the moving truck. Ryan stepped out wearing sunglasses, his phone to his ear, probably live-streaming his victory. My mom followed behind him with a tote bag, looking like she was walking into a country club. And behind them, 2 guys from the moving company, lifting boxes labeled Mom's China and Ryan's office. I stayed on the porch, calm as ever, sipping coffee. And then they saw him, Mr. Whitmore, in his pressed gray suit, holding a black leather folder, standing beside me like the angel of paperwork. Ryan stopped in his tracks. His smile vanished. My mom's mouth opened, then closed again like a goldfish. The two movers looked between us, unsure whether to keep going or drop everything and run. "You're trespassing," Mr. Whitmore said, matter of fact. "And this house is protected under an irrevocable trust. That trust cannot be modified, sold, or transferred by anyone but the trustee. That's Jake. You have no legal claim. And if you attempt to enter the premises, we'll proceed with criminal charges for fraud and attempted theft." Ryan turned red. Not angry red. Embarrassed red. Like he'd just walked into a job interview with toilet paper stuck to his shoe. Mom looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw something behind her eyes that wasn't contempt. It was fear, and that's when something in me shifted. Not because they were being put in their place, but because I realized just how far they'd go. This wasn't over. They weren't going to back down. They were going to try again. And next time, it might not be with fake deeds and moving trucks. It might be worse. And I was ready, but I hadn't told them yet. Because I had one more surprise waiting. One more piece of paper in that folder. And when they saw what it was, they'd know just how badly they had underestimated me. Mr. Whitmore didn't even need to raise his voice. That man had the quiet authority of a judge on verdict day. He calmly opened the folder, revealing a stack of papers, each one neatly labeled with sticky notes and tabs. My mom leaned in as if she could read them from 10 feet away, and Ryan stepped forward again, but Whitmore simply held up one hand. "Don't," he said. "You've already made one legal mistake this week." Ryan looked like a balloon that had been overinflated with hot air and then pinched at the neck. His chest puffed out, fists clenched at his sides, but no words came. He glanced at Mom, waiting for her to step in like she always did, but even she was quiet now. She was staring at the folder like it had fangs. I didn't say anything either. I just sat down in one of the porch chairs and watched the scene unfold, coffee in hand, heart finally slowing. Then Whitmore flipped to a specific page and read aloud. "This house and the surrounding property, including the private road and the gate, are not in Jake's name. They are owned by the Lydia Everhart Legacy Trust, which was established 3 weeks after Lydia's passing. Jake is the sole trustee, with no power to liquidate or transfer any part of the trust outside its guidelines. The trust is irrevocable and was filed with the county and state. Any attempts to modify ownership, including forgery, are prosecutable." He looked up. "That includes the fake deed transfer you filed, Mr. Ryan." The silence was thick. Even the movers, who had just unloaded a box labeled Ryan's Man Cave, stopped and slowly placed it back into the truck. One of them muttered something like, "Man, I ain't paid enough for this," and walked around to the driver's side. Mom finally broke the silence. "You're lying. This is some trick. Lydia wouldn't. She'd never lock the house like that. She trusted family." "Lydia," Whitmore replied, with the calmness of a man who'd read hundreds of wills, "trusted Jake. And after reviewing her journals and her formal letter of intent, which I also have in this folder, she made it clear that she foresaw this exact situation." He turned to me, then back to them. "She didn't just predict this. She planned for it." Ryan's voice cracked. "That's not fair. We're her family. I deserve something." And there it was. The word that always showed its face sooner or later with Ryan. Deserve. As if existence alone was enough to earn him a 6-bedroom estate and $250,000 in stocks. As if decades of disrespect and manipulation could be wiped away with a last name. "You deserve jail time for filing forged documents," Whitmore said, flipping to another page. "But Jake has chosen not to pursue criminal charges yet. That can change." I saw Ryan's jaw work like he wanted to say something clever, but the words never landed. He turned to Mom, expecting her to jump in with righteous fury, but she was already on her phone, scrolling furiously, trying to find something to prove this wasn't real, something to undo it. But she wasn't going to find it. I stood up slowly, stepped down the porch, and walked toward them. Calm. Measured. I was done playing defense. "I know what you tried to do," I said, my voice quieter than I expected, but firm. "And I know you think this house is some kind of prize to be claimed. But it's not a trophy. It's not a flipping opportunity. This place mattered to Lydia. And whether you believe it or not, She didn't want it ending up in your hands. Ryan sneered. Why? Because I wouldn't turn it into a shrine like you? Lydia didn't care about all this. She had money sitting around for years. She didn't even enjoy it. She enjoyed the quiet, I said, my voice rising slightly. She enjoyed not having to deal with leeches. She enjoyed being left alone. And she left it to me because she knew I'd protect it. He scoffed. So what? Now you're the gatekeeper of the family legacy. No, I said. I'm the gatekeeper of her legacy. And you're not family. Not the kind that matters. Something in Ryan's face twitched. A vein pulsed near his temple, and for a moment I thought he might lunge. But instead, he shook his head, laughed bitterly, and turned away. Mom finally spoke again, her voice like cold steel. You'll regret this, Jake. You think you're above us now, but you're not. Blood doesn't forget. One day you'll need help. One day you'll be alone. I nodded, slowly. Maybe. But I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people waiting to stab me the second my back's turned. She didn't reply. She just walked back to the car, Ryan trailing behind her like a scolded child. The movers didn't say a word. They repacked the 2 boxes they'd unloaded, shrugged at me, and drove off without another glance. But the peace didn't last long. That night, my phone started blowing up. Emails, messages, a letter sent by courier, a voicemail from someone claiming to be an estate reassignment officer, which was nonsense. It became clear that they weren't done, they were regrouping. And worse, I found out Ryan had tried to talk to someone at the county registrar's office, tried to explain how the trust had been formed under duress and how he, as the rightful heir, needed access to Lydia's full portfolio. They were getting desperate, and desperation can be dangerous. I started reviewing the security footage more often. I had cameras installed at every corner of the property, with cloud backups. I notified the trust's attorney and asked Whitmore to remain on call for the foreseeable future. But more than anything, I began preparing for what I knew was coming. The next move. Because people like Ryan and my mother don't take no as a final answer. They take it as a challenge. And sure enough, 3 nights later, just past 11 p.m., I heard something on the front porch. A soft thump, like a boot hitting wood. I turned off the TV and stood, heart suddenly pounding again. But I didn't reach for the light. I just picked up my phone, pulled up the security app, and tapped the live feed. And there they were. Mom, Ryan, a third guy I didn't recognize, standing just outside the door. And Ryan was holding something in his hand. Something metal. My thumb hovered over the screen. Because this time, they weren't trying to lie. They were trying to break in. I didn't move right away. Just stood there in the dark, heart hammering in my ears, watching them on the screen. Ryan was pacing like a dog at the edge of a fence, holding what looked like a crowbar or maybe a tire iron. Mom stood behind him, arms folded tight, her mouth moving rapidly, clearly giving orders, like this was some kind of tactical operation and not a felony. The third guy, he gave me a chill I couldn't explain. He was big, broad shoulders, heavy set, and unlike Ryan, he didn't look nervous. Just calm. Too calm. He wore a hoodie, hood up, and he wasn't looking at the house. He was looking directly at the security camera like he knew where it was. I backed away from the screen and reached for my side table. Inside was the small safe I kept for situations like this. Nothing too dramatic, just a legal firearm I was licensed to carry and a taser. I didn't want to escalate anything, but I wasn't stupid either. I'd lived in Lydia's house for almost 8 months now, and in all that time, I'd never once felt unsafe. Not until tonight. As I quietly moved toward the front door, I tapped the security alert that I'd had set up with the county sheriff's office, just in case. One push, and the system would automatically ping local dispatch with GPS coordinates and video feed access. I never thought I'd actually use it. But here we were. Back on the screen, I saw Ryan kneel by the front door and start fiddling with something, probably the lock. He wasn't great with tools, but I knew he had friends who were. Or maybe this third guy was the one who knew his way around a deadbolt. I hesitated. Not because I was afraid. Because I was angry. Angry that they would stoop this low. Angry that after everything, after the will, the trust, the forged deed, the moving truck, they were still trying to force their way into something that wasn't theirs. Angry that they couldn't accept no for an answer. I opened the door. Just a crack. Enough to let the motion sensor light kick on and bathe the porch in that cold, fluorescent glow. All 3 of them froze. Ryan scrambled to stand, the tool in his hand clattering to the floor. Mom took a step back, her face drained of color. And the big guy, he didn't flinch, but I saw his eyes narrow just slightly. I didn't say anything at first, just stood there, letting the silence stretch long and heavy. Then, calmly, I said, "You've got 5 seconds to get off my porch before the police arrive." Ryan's voice cracked. "You wouldn't call the cops on your own brother." "I didn't," I said. "I called them on 3 trespassers. Doesn't matter what your names are." Mom tried to speak, but I cut her off. "You've already tried lying. You've tried stealing. You even tried faking legal documents. And now you're breaking and entering with a guy who looks like he gets paid in cash and silence. You're not family anymore. You're a threat. I raised you," she snapped, stepping forward. "You ungrateful little." "I raised myself," I said louder now. "You were never there. Lydia was. And now you're mad that she saw through you." Behind them, I could hear sirens in the distance. Faint, but getting closer. The third guy, the stranger, turned to Ryan and muttered something. Probably something like, "We need to go." But Ryan wasn't leaving. He was shaking. Not with fear, he was shaking with rage. "You think you're better than us now?" he shouted. "With your stupid little papers and your security system and your holier-than-thou attitude?" I didn't respond. I just stared at him. Calm. Silent. Letting him unravel. "You don't deserve this place," he yelled. "You don't deserve any of it. You're a boring, uptight little freak who hid behind Aunt Lydia because you couldn't make it in the real world." He stepped forward again, and for a moment, I saw it. That flash in his eyes. That line he was thinking about crossing. But then the blue and red lights hit the treetops. Then the driveway. Then the porch. And just like that, everything changed. The third guy backed away instantly, hands up. Smart. The cruiser screeched to a halt, doors flying open. 2 deputies stepped out, guns low but drawn, barking commands. Mom raised her hands. Ryan froze. I didn't say a word. I just stepped out of the doorway, hands visible, and pointed at the dropped crowbar on the porch. "That's theirs," I said. "So is the attempted break-in." The officers moved fast. Within a minute, Ryan was cuffed and sitting on the edge of the porch, still yelling about how this was a family misunderstanding. Mom kept saying it was all a mistake and that they just came to talk. The third guy didn't say a word, just let himself be led to the car, calm as ever. But here's the thing. The real surprise wasn't the police. It wasn't even the trust. It was the folder Mr. Whitmore left on the coffee table that morning, just in case. Because inside that folder was a recording Lydia made 6 months before she died. Her voice, her words, her final message to me, and to them. And tomorrow morning, I plan to play it. For everyone. In court. The next morning, I showed up at the courthouse alone, dressed in a simple black jacket and slacks, folder in hand. I didn't need a lawyer today. This wasn't a trial. It was a preliminary hearing to determine whether criminal charges for attempted fraud, trespassing, and attempted unlawful entry would proceed to formal prosecution. But it was also my moment. My one shot to make everything plain. To show everyone exactly what had happened. No denials. No gaslighting. Just facts. Ryan and my mother arrived 15 minutes late. Ryan in a wrinkled button-up, trying to look put together but failing miserably. Mom wore a beige blazer over a tight-fitting dress that might have passed for respectable if her face didn't look like she'd spent the night grinding her teeth into dust. Their lawyer, a smug, fast-talking type named Preston, greeted the clerk with a smile, then turned to me with a nod like we were coworkers or old neighbors. "Jake," he said, extending his hand. "Glad we could settle this like family today." I didn't shake it, just looked at him and said, "You might want to hear what's in the folder before you finish that sentence." He laughed politely and went to sit with them at the table. I took a seat near the front row, and when Judge Hamilton entered, everyone stood. He was an older man with a slow, commanding presence, the kind of judge you couldn't charm, out-talk, or intimidate. He'd seen everything, and he wasn't impressed by theatrics. After the bailiff read the charges and the usual formalities were out of the way, Judge Hamilton leaned back in his chair and looked down at the documents in front of him. "So we have an allegation of attempted fraudulent property transfer, trespassing, and unlawful entry," he said. "Counselor, your clients claim this was a misunderstanding. Is that correct?" Preston stood up, buttoned his jacket, and began speaking with the kind of polished ease that only comes from 1,000 courtroom performances. "Yes, Your Honor. At the heart of this matter is a family disagreement. exacerbated by grief and confusion over an estate. My clients believed they were entitled to access the property in question and had been led to believe that the transfer was, if not finalized, then certainly underway. It was, at most, a miscommunication. The judge raised one eyebrow. A miscommunication involving a crowbar? Preston didn't flinch. My client, Mr. Ryan Callahan, acknowledges that he brought a tool with him, but maintains it was for accessing a shed on the property he believed was his, not for any unlawful entry into the home. Judge Hamilton glanced down at the file again. And the attempt to file a forged deed transfer with the registrar's office? Preston smiled, just barely. Again, Your Honor, that filing was made in the sincere belief that my client was executing a document he had a right to pursue. If there was an error, it was not one made with malicious intent. I finally stood. Your Honor, I said, voice clear and calm. May I submit a piece of evidence? Judge Hamilton gestured for me to approach. I handed the clerk the folder Mr. Whitmore had left me, the one with the audio file Lydia recorded months before her death. Along with it, I submitted a written transcript, signed by Lydia, notarized, and included in the trust paperwork that was already on record. The clerk placed a small speaker on the bench, and Hamilton looked over the paperwork before nodding. We'll allow it. I took my seat again as the courtroom fell silent. And then Lydia's voice filled the room. Jake, if you're hearing this, then it means my instincts were right. I hope they weren't, but I know better. Your mother and your brother, they've always seen people as tools, not as family. You were the only one who never asked me for anything. That's why you're the one I trusted. She took a slow breath, and for a moment, the room felt like she was there again. Sitting by the window in her reading chair, sunlight warming her hands, always sharp as a tack. I want the house to be yours, but I know they'll try to take it. That's why I put it all in the trust. Because they'll try tricks, lies, maybe even threats. You need to protect yourself, Jake. You need to stand your ground. And if they come for you, play this. Let them hear me say it plain. Her voice hardened. Ryan, Diane, if you're hearing this, you need to understand something. You were never entitled to my money. You were never owed this house. You had years to treat me with respect, with kindness, with decency. You chose manipulation, lies, and distance. This estate is not for you. It's not for flipping or selling. It's not a shortcut. It's a gift. For Jake. She paused. And if you can't accept that, then you deserve nothing. The recording ended. The silence afterward was deafening. Preston shifted uncomfortably. Mom looked pale, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. Ryan just sat there, motionless, eyes locked on the table in front of him. Judge Hamilton looked down at the transcript again, then slowly removed his glasses and set them on the bench. I've reviewed the trust documents, he said. I've seen the footage of the attempted break-in. And now I've heard the decedent's own words. He turned his gaze toward Ryan and my mother. This was not a miscommunication. This was a deliberate, sustained attempt to defraud the rightful trustee of his property. And when that failed, you attempted to intimidate and illegally enter the home. He leaned forward, voice firm. Mr. Callahan, you are hereby ordered to cease any and all contact with Mr. Jake Callahan, effective immediately. A restraining order will be filed. Mrs. Callahan, the same applies to you. Mom opened her mouth, but he raised his hand. You are lucky criminal charges haven't been formally pressed yet. If you attempt any further contact, that luck will run out. Then he turned to me. Mr. Callahan, you've handled yourself with remarkable restraint. I strongly advise you to maintain the trust as your end intended and to remain vigilant. You've done well. I nodded. Thank you, Your Honor. And just like that, it was over. I walked out of the courthouse alone, the morning sun warm on my face, and I felt lighter than I had in months. No shouting. No final confrontation. No need to scream or slam doors. Just the truth. Cold, clear, and documented. Lydia had planned for everything, and I had followed her playbook to the letter. Back at the house, I sat on the porch and stared out at the trees, breathing in the silence. The air felt cleaner somehow, sharper, like something had been purged. I knew Ryan and Mom wouldn't give up completely. People like that rarely do. But now, they'd have to operate from the shadows, and I had the law on my side. The cameras stayed up, the locks were reinforced, and Mr. Whitmore remained on retainer. A week later, I got a letter from Ryan's lawyer. Not Preston, someone new. It was a settlement offer, a final attempt to amicably part ways if I gave them a small portion of the estate. Enough for Ryan to start over and for Mom to secure her retirement. I didn't even respond. Some letters deserved to stay unopened. Instead, I called a contractor and started work on renovating Lydia's library into a studio space. I planned to digitize all her journals, catalog her books, and maybe even start writing myself. Stories. Memoirs. Who knows? The house didn't just feel like mine now. It was mine. Not because I held the title, but because I earned it. By fighting for it. By honoring Lydia's trust. And by refusing to let greed rewrite history. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a mug of coffee, I found one of her old journals tucked behind a shelf. Inside was a note, written in her elegant, looping script. You may be quiet, Jake, but in the end, you're the only one who listened. That's why you'll outlast them. You always were the legacy I wanted. I smiled. For the first time in a long time. Not out of pride. Not out of victory. But because I knew. She was right. And finally, the house was quiet again.